You guys ever notice how people complain constantly about the current state of superhero movies and how these movies are all the same and they're all interchangeable, and we really just wish someone would do something new and interesting and at least remotely original with this genre. But then when someone does, nobody watches it. That's weird, right? That's why today we're going to review a little watch film from this year called Fast Color.
Moving over everything fast like a race.
Welcome back to the channel, guys. As I said, this week we're going to be reviewing Fast Color, the second sort of the sophomore directorial effort from director Julia Hart. It's a movie that's gotten like a lot of buzz from people who have seen it, who have been trying to scream from the rooftops how good it is, but almost no one saw it. I think it grossed like less than $100,000 or something madness like that. Now, Fast Color is no longer in theaters. I decided to review it for this week's video because a couple of days ago it hit VOD, so it was available to purchase for streaming and stuff like that. I completely missed it when it was in theaters. When I first heard about the film, I knew it was something that I would want to personally check out. But it didn't get very wide release, didn't get very strong marketing. Just to underline how difficult it was for people to see this film, this movie had a 1-week run at a theater that is 2 blocks from my apartment. I could have seen it so easily, except I didn't find out it was playing there until 2 days before the run was up, and I had to work both of those nights. I could have walked to this movie, and I am like the person who would be like designated the person that wants to see this kind of movie. You know what I mean? Like, I am like the fucking core audience. So that's what we're doing this week. I did see Toy Story 4 earlier in the week. I just didn't think there's a point making a video about it because, like, I don't know if you want to watch like a 45-second video of me saying Toy Story 4 is awesome. There's just nothing to really talk about. And I did have a longer, sort of more involved video that I was going to do for this week that I've just going to do as a bonus video next week because it's kind of indulgent and kind of rambly. So be on the lookout for that, probably like Wednesday. But yeah, for now, Fast Color. So the Fast Color is technically sort of a superhero movie, but like not really. Fast Color is about this family of black women who all have supernatural abilities. And it's just sort of about like these 3 generations of women and how they interact with their abilities and gifts and how they interact with the world. It is not like a superhero movie in the sense that most people think about superhero movies now. You know, something with like a mega, $100 million budget, like a bunch of big effects, huge set pieces and action and stuff like that. It's not like that. It's much more indie, it's much more, lo-fi, and much more meditative, a lot more quiet. My first introduction to Julia Hart was I actually watched her first movie, Miss Stevens, right before this, because I was curious about it. And it looked like the kind of movie that I would not enjoy. It looked like a little bit too sort of like twee, navel-gazing indie shit. It's got a lead performance from Lily Rabe, who I loved in Alex Ross Perry's Golden Exit. It's also got an even younger Timothée Chalamet doing his Timothée Chalamet shtick. It's a sweet little movie. I was much more a fan of it than I expected to be. And it made me even more excited, actually, for Fast Color, because I was like, well, that's what she did with this sort of insular little like indie drama thing. Like, what will she do with like something a little more high concept? Spoiler alert, I quite enjoyed the movie. I think it's very well made. I think it's pretty damn good. It's different in a way that is both frustrating at times and also, I think, very necessary. I will say frustrating at times in the sense that many people will watch this movie and think it's boring because they're sort of conditioned to expect stories about superpowers and things like that to be more outsized and to kind of follow a certain paradigm. And because this doesn't follow that paradigm, they may unfairly malign this film and see it as like lesser than, and that's not really fair. But even within that, even as a person who likes kind of quieter movies and likes things that are more about human drama than just big genre spectacle, even within that, there's little passages in the middle of this film that, for my money, get a little bit too close to the indie navel-gazing of her debut, like where I was kind of like, okay, they're kind of dragging a bit. The movie's an hour and 40 minutes, which is a decent length, but there's definitely parts where I was getting bored, and I'm someone who does have more patience for this sort of film. The movie stars Gugu Mbatha-Raw as Ruth, a woman who's on the run from someone, probably some evil secret government people, because of the special ability she has to sit in the future, and it's a place in the future that looks just like our world now, but like slightly poorer and sadder, very slightly, because we're already pretty poor and sad. And in this world, it has not rained for like a very long time, so there's this heavy drought. There's this really great scene setting us up where Ruth is trying to hide out at like a shitty motel somewhere on the side of the road, and they tell her that like the room is $30 a night, but that to get half a jug of water is like the same price, to let you know that like water is scarce and stuff. very Mad Max. To explain it like in layman's terms, and in terms of the vibe, it kind of feels a little bit like a smarter version of like Heroes, in terms of like that this is a world where superpowers exist, but it's like plainclothes, not as heavy in the mythology, and a lot more just like, hey, it's humans, it's the regular people stuff. Because when we see Ruth's powers first manifest, she has a seizure that causes an earthquake. So she's like, oh, okay, I get it, she has powers, she's on the run, yada, yada, yada. And the general thrust of her narrative is that she grew up with these powers. Her mother, played by Lorraine, has these powers as well. Her name's Bo. Ruth's daughter also has these powers. And when Ruth was younger, she had like a bad streak where she went through addiction and stuff, and she couldn't control her powers the way her mother could, and she ran away, leaving her mother with her daughter to raise her. And now she has nowhere else to go, so she has to go back home and reunite with her mother and the daughter that, you know, probably thinks she's like dead, and it becomes this like big family affair thing. It's a very touching movie in that regard. The focus is really on the characters and sort of like this generational trauma of having these abilities and how that means they can't function in the real world and how they have to hide and they're always being chased and stuff. In that way, it kind of reminds you of like what like good X-Men stories are like. I mean, as I've had in my other video, we talk about how the cinematic version of the X-Men just kind of captures a lot of the basic outer trappings of why the comics work, but not the inner stuff, the stuff that actually matters. Fast Color reminds me that if you actually read enough superhero comics and not just watch superhero movies every year, that there's like a variety in tone within the world of Cape Comics, right? Every superhero comic is not a annual event book. There are tons of comics that feature characters with superpowers and explore what their world is like and what their struggles are on a much slower, smaller scale. That's like acceptable in the genre. Tons of people have played in that space. And especially in the X-Men, where, you know, any random person could be a mutant who has a power, and then you could follow their story and deal with their afflictions and stuff. None of the movies that come out, all of these movies based on comics and superheroes and things, do that anymore. they just don't. It's just not a thing. Fast Color is different because once you actually get to see Bo, Ruth's mother, show her power and how it works and what she does, it's the kind of power that, like, if a character in like an X-Men or like a Marvel movie had this power, they wouldn't even be a person. They would just be like a MacGuffin, because the power is like so huge. It's like conceptually, it's a gigantic ability. It makes you like a god. Like, it's crazy big. But because this movie is so small and so low budget, I mean, the effects work that brings the powers to life is beautiful and looks good. It doesn't look cheap, but it's so much smaller than what we're used to. It's not like this big drastic thing. It's very sort of mellifluous and dreamlike. It's like it undercuts the fact that, like, oh, like if this woman so chose, she could like do a lot of really big, wild, crazy shit. This just isn't that kind of story. It's like you get why people are chasing her. The government clearly would want to have a person that could do these things, but it's like, that's not what this is about. And it reminds me that, you know, every movie about someone that could do huge abilities doesn't have to be like, you know, this person is just a bomb and someone's going to use them to like destroy a city, and then we got to watch the city get destroyed, and then someone's going to have to kill them and be sad about it. You know, like, I suppose I haven't really been thinking about just how sick of that paradigm I am until I watched this movie and remembered that, like, I've been reading comics since I was 4, and like, you can do different things with superpowers. You just don't have to always do the same, like, couple of major film tropes regurgitated over and over again. It's very clear that Julia Hart didn't make this movie because she wanted to make a superhero movie, right? It's interesting because she wanted to make a movie about women and about how mothers and daughters relate, and about how women's experiences are different than the experiences of men, and about how the experiences of black women are very different than the experiences of other people, and how there are a lot of elements of femininity that are like gifts, that are good things, that are very like powerful things, that are treated like not good things, and you feel like you have to hide them and stuff. Obviously, this isn't something I'm personally attuned to, but like, I get it, you know. It's a simple metaphor, and it works very well. The entire story functions pretty solidly as an allegory, which is like what the appeal of the X-Men comics used to be. They were like really big metaphors and allegories, and it undercuts how different it is when like the same 3 or 4 white dudes tell stories that are metaphors for otherness using superpowers versus now a woman's doing it. The chasm between the two approaches is vast, even more vast than the differences in budget and aesthetic and technical tone and things like that. Superpowers as a story concept, as like a factor or a feature in a narrative, really are only as interesting as the way they're applied to the story, the way they help pursue themes, and the way they're presented. And maybe for a lot of people, watching Fast Color is not going to be like their cup of tea. They're going to get bored. There's whole chunks where like nothing happens. I mean, there are parts where like nothing drastic happens, but interesting emotional beats happen, and then there are like legitimate scenes where like nothing happens. That's what I was talking about earlier. It's important not just because of the diverse representation. It's nice to see a story about black women because the two leads have fantastic chemistry, amazing performances. Considering that there's like 22 MCU movies and then all the black people in them that aren't in Black Panther are literally sidekick characters, it's refreshing, I'm not going to lie. But that's not quite it either. To me, I think it's interesting and important because it's necessary to remind people that this genre is incredibly close to metastasizing, and we need to be able to see other paths forward. Like, we're not going to stop making movies based on comic books or using superheroes or supernatural abilities or whatever. But there are other ways to do it, and I don't expect the X-Men MCU movie to like hire her to make the movie, right? Like, I don't think that's going to happen necessarily. But I do hope that now that the movie is available on VOD and it's hopefully going to find an audience that it could not in theaters, that more people are going to see this and maybe start to thirst for something they didn't know that they were missing. I think more people might actually want more humanity and more texture and richness in their stories about people with supernatural abilities than they think they do, because every 3 months they get a new Marvel movie and they just are happy with that. I think even if you're not a superhero person, like, Fast Color is pretty fascinating and interesting and enjoyable for like regular folk too. Like, you could be someone who thinks superheroes are childish and like adolescent power fantasies or whatever, but I still think you can watch this movie and enjoy it because it's less about powers and more about these women and these actual people. Some parts of the movie are less original and exciting than others. There's definitely parts of the film that feel like retreads of Jeff Nichols' Midnight Special. That's sort of like Carpenter-Spielberg hybrid movie that he made a couple years ago with Michael Shannon about a little boy that had powers and like an alien invasion thing, sort of Close Encounters vibes. That stuff I thought was kind of like flat, but the depth, once we actually start spending time with Ruth and her mother and her daughter and stuff, that stuff is really, really powerful, and it's just really strong. Like, it was something I wanted to like stay in, you know what I mean? Like, this easily could be like a series or a series of films, but that's not really the point. It isn't so much that something has to be a series or a franchise or have sequels. It's the notion that they actually made me care about the characters enough that I would even want that. To me, that is more important than whether or not you actually do get a sequel. I just think that's just something that used to be a mark of good storytelling, that you liked the people so much and cared about them that you wanted to see what happened next with them, not that you like actually had to go do it. So Fast Color, I wouldn't call it a perfect movie. I'm not saying drop every single thing you're doing to go watch it right now, but I do think it's something you should put to the forefront of your watch list, of your queue, if you will. It's a beautiful movie. It has really good performances. It has very strong cinematography. Like, the actual visuals are really captivating. The music is pretty good. The score is fantastic. And it just kind of works. One of my things about movies is, like, if I like the opening of a movie and then like I have issues with parts in the middle, or I'm not super like gung-ho some of the second act, but the ending is tight, then I like the movie. Like, you can fuck up a whole bunch of stuff in the middle, as long as you like stick the landing, I'm super good. And the ending of this movie is just beautiful. It's wonderful. It's exactly what I would have wanted from this kind of film. And I really sort of dare anyone to watch this and get to the end and not like the ending at the very least. It's really good. One of the more powerful moments I've seen on screen this year. So my hope for this is, one, that people actually finally watch Fast Color now that they can, and that all the critics who were like fighting for this movie for the last few months and shouting from the rafters that everyone should give it a chance actually do now give it a chance. And I hope that it has some kind of impact on the industry at large. Like, it's not gonna suddenly get like a big sequel greenlit or a bunch more money thrown at it or anything like that, but I do think that the movie is interesting enough and powerful enough that it should at least make producers and different people in development look at this and go, hey, we can do other shit. We don't have to end everything with a doomsday laser. Like, we can do other stuff. Because I think the more variety there is in the genre, the more variety there is in movies in general, the better it is for everybody. Like, everyone wants to see different stuff. And, like, there's tons of audiences that settle for the same old stuff because there's not alternatives. I think alternatives are important, and I think Fast Color is definite proof of that. So that's it for me this week. Hopefully you guys actually give this film a chance. If you've seen it and you have any thoughts on it, please share below in the comments. Let me know what your favorite parts were, or if you saw it and didn't like it for whatever reason, let me know about that too. Unless your reason is I don't like seeing black women on screen. If so, you could just go fuck yourself instead. If you guys like this video, please hit the thumbs up button. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe. And if you haven't hit the little bell icon next to the subscribe button, do that so you can be notified whenever my new videos come out. The next video, like I said, is going to be a little bit more experimental for me in terms of content, just talking about my feelings on some things and like a bit of a more like free-form nature. So that video will probably be out mid next week, and then for next Friday we'll review something else. I'm seeing some movies next week. We'll see which one fancies me the most. That's it. Thank you guys for watching, and have a great weekend.